Everyone. So in this session, I'm going to talk about how to take in user inputs. Okay. So the function in Python that is used to take in user input is input function. Okay. So whatever we write in these parentheses would be the statement displayed on the screen against which we have to put in the input, and then we can probably use it to assign a certain variable. Okay, so let me start with a very basic example. Say the variable that I'm using here is variable 1, and I'm using a input function here. The statement that I want to display in my application should be something like this: enter the value for variable 1. Okay, let me put a colon here and a space so that it looks good. uh, let's say the value for variable 1 I want is to be hello. Now, if I try to print var1, hello is what is being printed. Now, let me check the type of this variable. It will show me of class string. Okay, so this is a string object as expected. Now, let me define a variable var2, which happens to have a have values that is an integer. Okay, so let me, for that, what we have to do, we have to definitely have to use the input function, but we have to typecast it into an integer, and for the very sake I'm using this int function. Okay, now inside this I'm going to write the input function with the statement as enter the value for variable 2. I'll close both the functions. I'll put in, say, value 24. And now if I try to print variable 2, it will give me an integer that is 24. If I check the type of this variable, var2. So this is of class integer. Perfect. Also, if we try to, say, input a string here, that particular word value would be accepted by the input function for sure. But while typecasting, it will show an error saying that this cannot be typecasted. Okay. So these are very fundamentals that we discuss. Now let me give you a scenario wherein, say, I put these inputs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I want to create a list out of it. Okay. So how I'm going to handle that? So here the most important thing besides input function would be a split function. So split function is basically used to convert a string into a list. Okay, I'll show you what exactly I'm talking about. Now, let me say a variable 3 is there. Okay, I put in a function input here against this. Okay, as expected, the Python code expects an input from the source. Let me put something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, perfect. Now, if I try to print variable 3 here, it will basically print exactly what we just typed in. Now, if I check the type of this variable, it will be a string, hopefully. Exactly. This happens to be a string. Okay. Now, let me use a function that is, say, strip. I'll show you what is strip does. Okay. So input and then a strip function. I Let me put some extra spaces at the beginning. Then I write one space, two, three, four, five, six, and let me put some extra spaces at the end as well. Okay. Now, if I try to print var3, okay, it just prints me everything except those extra spaces that are there at the beginning, at the end. And the spaces at the end are not very visible, but you can very much assert this by looking at the extra spaces that has been scrapped off in my print statement. Okay, so what this strip function fundamentally does is it removes the extra spaces at the beginning or at the end. Okay, perfect. uh, so now again, if I check the type of this variable 3, it will show me as an object of string. Okay, now again I'll use the same variable, input this, use this input function, then strip to remove any extra spaces at the end or at the beginning or at the both the places. Then I'll be using a split function, and uh, and on what value I have to split this whole string, that should be on the space that we have in between. Okay, this value, this whole value. Okay, so for that very sake, here the character that I am going to put in would be a blank space. Now if I try to write 1 2 3 4 5 6 and try to print the variable 3, I'll get a list of strings. Okay, perfect, perfect. But this is not what I expect as an output, right? I want an output something like 1 2 3 4 5 and 6, right? So this is a list of strings, whereas the output that is expected now is a list of integers. Okay, so it's now high time that we typecast it. One way of typecasting this is that I run a loop. Okay, I create a, say, a blank list, say L is equal to L being a blank list, and I loop through this list. Okay, so for I in var 3 L dot append str, or rather int, sorry, int I. Now if I try to print L, I'll get exactly what I expect. Perfect. But this is an older way of doing things, or a more conservative way of doing it. But let me show you a new function here, that is map. Okay, so what map does is, for each value of this list, okay, it will assign this int function, or rather whichever function which you want to put in, against each value of this list. Okay, so the two basic parameters that is expected in map, it will be the first, the function that we want to process against each value. Okay, here the function that I am going to use is int, because I want to typecast each value, each string value, to a integer. So the function happens to be an int, and the iterable in here is var3. Now if I try to put in put this in a variable 4, say, okay, and we'll check the type of this variable, it will show me of class map. Okay, so this, what this map does is, it will try to typecast using this int function for each value for each value that is 1 2 3 4. Okay, and the output of this would be stored in var4. But here when we check the type of this output, it turns out to be of class map. If I try to print this variable, it will show me something like this. This is not what we expect, right? This is what our expectations, what our expectation is. Now, to handle this, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to run the same code. Okay, it's just that, like we used int to typecast, here I'm going to use a list to typecast. Okay, now if I check the type of this variable 4, it turns out to be of class list. And if I try to print this, it will be of the type that we expect. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6. Yeah, so I hope this is clear. So what we concluded from this portion was, there's one traditional way of doing it where we run this whole loop. Okay, and then try to typecast each value with int. And a much more advanced way of handling it is using a map function. So what does map function do is that it basically runs this int functions against each value in the in the iterable. Okay, and then try to typecast it, and whatever the value, whatever the final value is, we check the type of this. It happens to be of type map. Now to change it into a list, we'll use a list function. And the final value that we achieve is the target that we expected this I mean this process to do process to result in. Okay, so that is it for today's session. I hope you liked it. Let's meet in the next videos.